I wonder if you've ever had the experience of being invited to a meal where you can't control the seating arrangements, perhaps at a wedding or a work event, and the sense of anxiety that accompanies checking the table listings to see who you're going to be sat on a table with. Or perhaps, to switch the analogy, perhaps you've even got memories of eating your lunch in the school hall, and you go up to the counter and you get your tray of gruel and you turn around and you cast your assessing gaze over the various tables in the room, and you're making a whole lot of calculations. Do I know the people here? Do I like the people here? Do they like me? Is that empty seat being saved for someone? If I get stuck on that table, am I going to be left carrying the conversation? You make those kind of calculations whether you realize it or not. Well, Paul in chapter 2 seems to be describing that kind of situation whereby Peter, who was once very happy to share a table with non-Jews, he has changed his behavior and started deliberately distancing himself from non-Jews, from Gentiles, because, as we read, he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. Now, table fellowship in this culture, in the first century, in this part of the world, was an enormously important thing. And so Peter's growing reluctance and his eventual refusal to eat with Gentiles at all is saying something, isn't it? In fact, it is screaming something out, and that is a denial of the gospel. The good news that anyone from any background with any baggage can be saved by Christ. Peter is denying that. Now, this is important, not with his lips, but with his life. I'm as confident as I could be that if you asked him, are Gentiles genuinely saved? He would say, yes, of course. In fact, his vision back in Acts chapter 10 taught that to him. But he's not now living like it. Now, just notice the cause of this division and the consequences of this division as well. The cause of this shift in behavior from Peter was the arrival of a group of people to his church from the circumcision party. Now, I know what you're thinking. Firstly, that's a party I'd rather not be invited to. But secondly, haven't we heard of these guys before? And the answer is yes. They are sometimes branded as Judaizers. We thought about them in the previous chapter. They are the people in the early church era trying to advance the idea that before you can become a Christian, you must effectively first become a Jew. There's no salvation without circumcision, they would say. And so, we read, these people arrive in Antioch and suddenly Peter starts withdrawing from Gentile Christians. Why? Well, because he was afraid. That is a heartbreaking reason to read, isn't it? Peter's life in particular seems to pendulum between courage and cowardice, and he's done it here again. The courage to get out of the boat, and yet fearful enough to fail even when walking on the water. The courage to follow Jesus right into the courts of the high priest, and then immediately fearful enough to deny him to the face of a servant girl. Here, once again, a man who is courageous enough to preach the gospel accurately and faithfully is too cowardly to really live in light of it. Now, you have your besetting sins, I have mine, but they are not without consequence. It seems that this is one of Peter's. Peter, a man of such prominence and position in the early church, begins to withdraw from Gentile Christians, and we see now the consequences of such an action. Verse 13, the other Jews joined him in his hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray. Even Barnabas, perhaps the warmest, most loving, most relational Christian we meet in the New Testament, the best bridge builder the early church has to offer. Even Barnabas is taken in by this shift in behavior and begins to withdraw from the Gentile Christians. You see the confusion, in fact the outright contradiction, in God's people telling these Gentile converts, the God of the universe, the God of all holiness, the God who is just and right and pure and perfect, he forgives you, he adopts you, he accepts you because of what Christ has done, but I don't. He will have fellowship with you, but I won't. What a bizarre, hypocritical place for Peter to find himself in, to keep at arm's length some of the very people that God has brought near. And let me be very specific here, before we become too attached to the idea of Peter being our punching bag. Isn't that true of you? Isn't that true of me? Aren't there particular people, Christians even, who you do keep at arm's length? People who you would never share table fellowship with? Do you not recognize the hypocrisy in that? When God sees fit to bring them near, Yes, they may well have sinned against you, but you have sinned against them and you've sinned against God. Now, what a strange thing that He forgave them, but you won't. Your standards are higher than God's. You see how mad that is? Their sin, not in part but the whole, is nailed to the cross and they bear it no more. And yet they still have to bear up under your grudge against them even now. Why? He took their punishment at great personal cost, and yet you won't even endure the mild discomfort required to extend the hand of peace. Isn't it crazy how Christians can fall out like that? You see how it's entirely possible to be accurate in what you believe, but miss the mark in how you behave, especially in how you treat others. And in doing so, you are denying something of the gospel of grace. May God help us, not just to know the gospel, but to really, genuinely live in light of it ourselves.